I was quite pleased with how my Dragon Ball Z VR toy was coming along. I could stand on the planet Namek firing Kamehamehas and slicing objects with Destructo discs to my heart's content. There were a few things that I wanted to add to round off the experience though. The first thing I wanted to add was the ability to fly. That meant I had to figure out how to use SteamVR's input system so I could use the analog stick and buttons to control my flight movement. I found a very nice article on this which helped a lot. I'll leave a link to it in the description. After adapting some of the code from that article, I had my first working input, flying up by pressing the B button on the Oculus Quest's right-hand controller. Next, I just had to add the ability to fly down with the A button and fly horizontal with the analog stick. With that done, I could fly around in all directions. It felt a little bit weird silently floating around though. I wanted to add a sound effect to give the impression of movement similar to the sound effect in the anime. I did that by creating some white noise using a free online sound effect generator called JSFXR. I set that sound to loop while flying and adjusted the pitch and volume of the sound based on how fast I was moving. I was quite pleased with how all that turned out. Flying around my little Mechian island felt surprisingly natural. I wasn't stopping there. Next, I wanted to add some key blasts that I could fire lots of in quick succession like they do many times in the anime. I started off by reusing my key sphere effect from the Kamehameha. I changed it to yellow and made it smaller so it was the right size for a key blast. Then I created two scripts. One called Key Blast, which would handle the creation of key blasts, and one called Key Blast Fly, to handle what each individual key blast should do. In the Key Blast script, I added some code to instantiate a new key blast whenever my hand moved over a certain speed. All the Key Blast Fly script did at this point was move any newly created key blasts in the same direction that my hands were moving in. That kind of worked, but it's not really the effect I was going for. The key blasts were moving way too fast and too many of them were spawning. I added a short cooldown to stop so many of them spawning, but I absent-mindedly added that code to the wrong script, which led to some very strange, jerky key blasts. After moving the code to the correct script, I ended up with something that was closer to what I was expecting. Fewer key blasts were spawning now, which looked better, but they still didn't move or look quite right. They were way too fast, so I slowed them down a bit, which made them look much closer to what I wanted, but still not good enough. I thought the effect would look much more convincing if the key blasts left a bit of a trail behind, so I added a trail renderer, which was actually really easy. It was looking pretty good now, but the experience wasn't satisfying without any sounds or interactions with other objects. I wanted the key blasts to explode and make a little dust cloud wherever they landed, so I got to work making a new particle effect using Unity's particle effect graph. As per usual, creating the effect took a fair amount of time. I sat there staring at the particle effect graph, tweaking little things here and there until I had the effect I wanted. All I had to do then was make the effect appear whenever the key blast hit something. That should have been the easy part, but unfortunately it didn't turn out how I was expecting. I had somehow changed my Dragon Ball Z key blasts into Bakugo's quirk from My Hero Academia. This was one of the cooler little mishaps, so rather than heading straight to fix it, I actually flew around and played with it for a while pretending I was Bakugo, because yes, I'm that sad. Maybe I should try recreating some My Hero Academia powers in VR. Anyway, the problem was actually quite easy to fix. It turned out that my key blasts were hitting my hands immediately as they were instantiated, which caused them to explode. That was simple enough to fix by checking the other game objects tag in the key blasts on collision method. That way, whenever a key blast hit something, it would check whether that thing was my hands or something else, and only explode if it wasn't my hands. The last thing my key blasts needed was some sound effects. One sound for when the key blast is fired, and another sound for when the key blast hits something. I found a firing sound effect online and added it to my Key Blast Fly script by adding an audio source that plays the sound effect in the start method. That way, the sound would play as soon as the key blast was instantiated. For the hitting sound, I played around with the same tool I used to make the flying sound. I basically just randomly generated explosion-y sounds until I found one I liked. I added some code into the collision method of the key blast to play that sound whenever the key blast hit something. Now my key blast power was feeling really satisfying to play with, so of course I spent a good while pretending I was a Vegeta, firing a key blast barrage at Cell like my life depended on it. Shooting at the ground and trees was fun and all, but I wanted something a little bit more interesting to shoot at. I decided to add some characters to the scene for me to indiscriminately murder. Choosing which character to use was a bit tricky, but there's really only one villain that comes to mind when you think about Dragon Ball Z. One of the only baddies in the entire anime that was capable of defeating your favourite orange martial arts uniform wearing protagonist. That character was the iconic and infinitely memorable Cyberman. I know, it's not exactly Frieza, and it doesn't really make sense for them to be on Namek, but whatever, I still went with it. I got a Cyberman model online from a very cool person who managed to rip it from a Dragon Ball Z game, though I can't remember specifically which game it was. It took a bit of fiddling in Blender to get it to open properly in Unity, but I'll spare you the hours of failed attempts and skip to the good bit. I got the model into Unity, and I wanted to make it run around. Nothing intelligent or what might be considered actual gameplay, I just didn't want them to be standing still. I found a free asset pack on the Unity Asset Store which included some basic animations and movement scripts. I'll leave a link to it in the description of this video. Using that asset pack, I got to work on making the Cyberman run around. I created a script called Dumb AI. All this script did was randomly select a point on the map every so often, and tell the asset pack's character controller to move there. This took a teensy bit of tweaking to get it working, but to my surprise, it actually just kinda worked. Far better than I had expected at least. My Cyberman would now move around a bit rather than just standing completely still. Now that he was fully animated, I had to jump into VR to say hi to the little guy. If you've ever wondered what it might be like to stand side by side with a Cyberman, well, it was somewhat underwhelming, but still really cool to have an actual moving character in my scene. The Cyberman lacked one very crucial trait for any video game baddie though: murderability. I could shoot at the Cyberman, but nothing would happen, so I had to change that. I used Unity's ragdoll tool to create a ragdoll of the Cyberman, so that when he got hit, he could fall to the ground. Creating the ragdoll was also surprisingly straightforward. With that created, I added a method to the Dumb AI script called ragdoll, which could be called by other objects to tell the Cyberman to fall down. In that method, I just had to disable the animator and character controllers and the Cyberman would ragdoll. In the key BLASTS script, I checked if any Cyberman had been hit and called their new ragdoll method to tell them to fall to the ground. Now, my Cybermen could run around and, more importantly, get murdered. And boy was I ready to murder. Now that I had got that out of my system, the last thing I wanted to add was the ability to charge up my key, complete with sound effects and a fiery aura. To me, that would be the delicious icing on an already tasty cake. Making it was again a question of using Unity's particle effect graph. I wasn't sure what kind of particle would be best though. I was keen to get that spiky look, just like in the anime, so I created my own particle that was basically just a jagged zigzag type thing. Unfortunately, that was a complete waste of time because it looked terrible. It turned out that just using a triangle was the best looking option, so that's what I went with. I'll skip past every tiny tweak I made on the particle effect graph, else we'll be here for a while. Once I had it looking how I wanted, I just had to add some scripts to control it, and add some sound effects to make it satisfying. The script was very simple. I just instantiated the aura when I pressed a button, and slowly faded it away once I had stopped pressing the button. After adding some sound effects that I found online, I ended up with this. I'm quite pleased with how this little project has ended up. There's still lots of room for improvements and additions, but I think I'll be leaving it alone for now. I had a lot of fun making this, and I'm thrilled that you're still here watching. I'll be looking into what other fun things I can make in VR, so please subscribe if you're interested in seeing what I end up making and how I end up making it. I'd really love to hear any suggestions you might have as well, so leave a comment if anything springs to mind. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.